There was a time you posted something and then checked. And checked again. And told yourself the number didn't matter while everything inside you waited for it to move. There was a time you made a decision and then quietly surveyed everyone around you, not for advice, but for permission. Not because you didn't know what you wanted. Because you didn't fully trust that what you wanted was allowed to be enough. That version of you was not weak. That version of you was simply still waiting for the outside world to tell you who you were. Something has been changing. And this video is about what that change actually means. There was a version of you that needed people to agree with your decisions before you could feel certain about them. That called it seeking advice but meant something closer to seeking permission. That posted something and then checked, and checked again, and checked once more, not because the number mattered, you told yourself, but because something underneath the number did. That version of you was not weak. That version of you was human in the most ordinary, unexamined way. But something has been shifting. Quietly. Without a dramatic moment you can point to. And lately the checking feels different. Lately the silence after a decision feels less like uncertainty and more like something approaching peace. This video is about what that shift actually is. And why most people never feel it. Validation is not vanity. That is the first thing to understand. The need for external approval is not a character flaw installed in people who did not try hard enough to be confident. It is a survival mechanism. Developmental psychologists have documented for decades that human beings are born into a state of complete dependency, not just physical, but emotional. The infant who is seen, responded to, mirrored accurately by its caregiver develops what researchers call a secure attachment. The infant whose signals are ignored, misread, or inconsistently answered learns something different. It learns that its internal experience requires external confirmation to be real. That what it feels does not fully exist until someone else acknowledges it. Most people carry that learning their entire lives without ever examining it. They simply experience it as a vague, persistent need to be understood. To be agreed with. To be seen in a particular way. To have the room respond to them in a manner that confirms they are what they hope they are. It is invisible to them because it has always been there. Like asking a fish to notice water. You have started to notice the water. And that noticing, that specific, uncomfortable clarity, changes the nature of every social interaction you will ever have again. Because once you see the mechanism, you begin to see it everywhere. The colleague who frames every opinion as a question, quietly scanning the room for approval before they commit to their own position. The friend who tells the same story at every gathering, adjusting it slightly each time depending on which version got the strongest response. The person who remodels their personality depending on who they are standing next to, not consciously, not cynically, just reflexively, the way a plant tilts toward light without deciding to. All of them running the same ancient program. All of them outsourcing the question of their own worth to whoever is nearest. You used to do this too. You may still do it in rooms where the old patterns feel safest. But something in you has begun to recognize the transaction, and recognition, once it arrives, makes unconscious behavior genuinely difficult to continue. Here is what makes modern life particularly brutal for anyone trying to wake up from this. The entire architecture of the digital world is engineered to keep the validation loop running at maximum speed. Platforms that quantify human approval into a number, updated in real time, visible to anyone. Systems designed by some of the most sophisticated behavioral scientists alive, specifically calibrated to make the distance between one notification and the next feel unbearable. The anxiety that lives in the space between posting something and receiving a response, that anxiety is not accidental. It was manufactured. Refined through millions of data points until it became nearly impossible to resist. And what it produces, at scale, is a population that has outsourced its sense of self so completely that many people cannot make a simple decision without consulting external opinion first. cannot sit with an unanswered question about themselves without immediately reaching for the validation of a stranger, cannot tolerate being misunderstood without launching an explanation, a defense, a correction, not because accuracy matters, but because the thought of existing in someone else's perception as the wrong thing is unbearable. The exhaustion you have been feeling in social spaces lately, that is where it comes from. Not from the people. From the invisible labor of managing how you exist in their minds. Conscious people stop doing this. Not all at once. Not through discipline or self-improvement or a decision made on a Tuesday morning. They stop because the cost becomes visible. Because awareness, once it develops past a certain threshold, makes the transaction feel exactly like what it is, trading pieces of yourself for the temporary comfort of someone else's approval. And temporary is the operative word. Because validation from external sources does not accumulate. It evaporates. The compliment that felt essential on Monday is forgotten by Wednesday. The approval you worked 3 weeks to earn dissolves the moment the person who gave it forms a different opinion. There is no amount of external validation that produces internal security. The research on this is unambiguous. Studies on what psychologists call contingent self-worth, self-esteem that rises and falls based on external feedback, consistently show higher rates of anxiety, emotional volatility, and what researchers call fragile high self-esteem. The appearance of confidence with none of the stability. Real stability looks different. It is quieter. It does not need the room to confirm it. And the path toward it is less about building confidence in the motivational sense and more about a gradual, sometimes uncomfortable process of bringing your attention home. Back inside yourself. Away from the constant monitoring of how you are being received and toward the more fundamental question of how you actually feel. What you actually think. What you actually want, not in response to what seems acceptable, but underneath all of that. In the place where your opinions exist before you have calculated whether they are safe to express. That place has been there your entire life. Most people visit it rarely. Some almost never. Because sitting inside your own experience, without the mediation of external feedback, requires a tolerance for uncertainty that the validation loop was specifically designed to eliminate. You are developing that tolerance. It does not feel like strength yet. It mostly feels like discomfort followed by unusual stillness. Here's what begins to change as that stillness deepens. The overexplaining stops. Not because you become secretive or withholding, but because you begin to understand something about explanation that nobody teaches explicitly. Most overexplaining is not communication. It is negotiation. It is the attempt to manage another person's perception of you so precisely that they cannot arrive at an unflattering conclusion. It is exhausting in the way that all forms of control are exhausting because it requires maintaining the illusion that you can determine what happens inside another person's mind. You cannot. You never could. And the moment you truly accept that, the need to keep trying quietly dissolves. You make a decision. You do not explain it 12 times to 12 different people looking for the version of yourself that their approval would construct. You make the decision. You live inside it. And if it turns out to be wrong, you adjust not because someone told you it was wrong, but because your own experience informed you. That is not arrogance. That is what it feels like to finally trust yourself. The relationships that survive this shift are worth examining. Because not all of them do. Some relationships were built entirely on the dynamic of you seeking and the other person providing approval, permission, reassurance. When you stop seeking, the structure of those relationships loses its function. Some people experience your new stillness as rejection. Some experience it as a threat. Some simply drift, because the connection was never really between two people, it was between your need and their ability to temporarily fill it. What remains is something different in quality entirely. The people who stay are the ones who were never interested in being needed by you. Who wanted, instead, to actually know you. And there is a profound difference between being known and being validated that most people spend their entire lives confusing for the same thing. Being validated means someone confirmed the version of you that you presented. Being known means someone saw past the presentation entirely and stayed anyway. That experience, when it arrives, does something to the nervous system that no amount of external approval ever managed. It settles something deeply. In a way that does not require maintenance, does not evaporate by Wednesday, does not need to be re-earned every time the room changes. So if you have been pulling back lately, explaining yourself less, feeling the urge to post something and then setting the phone down without doing it, sitting inside a decision without immediately canvassing opinions, noticing the relief that comes when a conversation ends without you having performed for it, pay attention to that relief. It is not apathy. It is not withdrawal. It is your nervous system recognizing, perhaps for the first time, what it actually feels like to exist on your own terms. You do not need the room to confirm what you already know. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming whole. And whole people do not chase. They simply are. And somehow the right things find them anyway. Do not move past this feeling too quickly. The quiet settling in your chest right now, that is not emptiness. That is what it feels like when something true lands without resistance. Most people will scroll into something louder within 30 seconds and lose it entirely. You do not have to. Sit inside it a little longer. Let it finish what it started. And when you are ready to go deeper, the next video is already there. But only when you are ready. The right realizations have never once needed to be rushed.